"You're not on the list," the guard said without looking up. I stood still. The hallway smelled of fresh polish and cut flowers, expensive, impersonal. Behind him, the ballroom glittered. Through the glass doors, I saw them rows of white chairs, round tables dressed in cream linen. A towering screen showed looping images of vertex milestones. Elias stood at the front, tuxedo sharp, flanked by board members and people I barely recognized anymore. The guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you'll need to step aside." Inside, Elias raised a glass. His smile stretched wide as someone leaned in to whisper something that made him laugh. My name wasn't mentioned. I watched him toast to vision and perseverance. I watched people I once mentored nod like they believed it. The jacket I wore was my husband's, the one he wore to our first pitch meeting, when Vertex was still just sketches and coffee-stained printouts in our living room. I'd had it tailored to fit me after he passed. Tonight it felt too heavy. Maybe check under Quill Meredith. Quill, I asked, though I already knew. The guard didn't bother to scroll again. I stepped aside. No one inside noticed. Or if they did, they pretended not to. There were no tears. Just something quiet that folded in my chest, the way a closing drawer makes no sound, but feels final. I stood there long enough to hear the first applause. The audio spilled faintly into the corridor as Elias began his speech. I recognized every phrase he was using, the same keynote I drafted 2 years ago, back when I still reviewed his numbers before board calls. I turned around and walked out, heels echoing across the marble. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled the jacket tighter and slipped my phone from my bag. I scrolled past missed messages, past an old photo of Elias in high school, his science fair medal crooked around his neck, and tapped Lionel's number. My lawyer picked up on the second ring. "It's time," I said. "Pull the operating agreement. I want to see what's still mine." For 2 days after the gala, I couldn't bring myself to open my laptop. The house was too quiet, and the silence had weight. I told myself I needed rest, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way Elias held that glass steady, confident, rehearsed. I knew that look. I'd worn it once years ago when everything we built was still held together with late nights and hope. By the third morning, I sat at my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside the screen. The homepage of Quill Systems loaded slowly, as if stalling for mercy. When it finally appeared, I stared at the new tagline: "Innovating the Future," led by visionary CEO Elias Quill. No mention of the woman who had filed the first patent, signed the first loan, mortgaged her own house to make payroll. The About page hurt worse. My name was there, but buried in a single sentence originally founded by the Quill family in Seattle. Not Meredith Quill, not founder. Just family, as if I were a collective ghost. Press releases followed the same pattern. Elias Quill, the new face of American innovation. Elias Quill expands logistics tech into global markets. My inbox flooded with newsletters from outlets I'd once spoken to as CEO. Not one had reached out for comment. When I called Lionel, he didn't sound surprised. "He's been positioning this for months," he said. "There's talk of dissolving the original LLC. If he does, your name disappears from every filing. It would look like he founded it himself." "How?" My voice came out flat. "He can't change history," Lionel sighed. "He can rewrite the record." That night I found a message from Grace, one of my early engineers. "Check the state business registry. He's already filed the new paperwork." I opened the site, entered the company name, and watched the search result appear. Quill Systems Inc., new entity, new EIN, new structure. Filed by Elias Quill. I stared at the timestamp submitted the same evening as the gala. Before I could stop myself, I clicked download copy, and the PDF landed in my folder, ready for whatever came next. I still remember the layout of that one-bedroom apartment better than any office we ever leased. The desk was a folding table pushed against the wall between the radiator and the window that never quite sealed. The crib sat just behind me, close enough that I could rock it with my foot while typing. Most nights I came home from the hospital around 9, showered, and started work by 10. Elias was a deep sleeper in those days, still small enough to fit in the crook of my arm. I'd hold him until he dozed off, then slide him into the crib and open my laptop. Second hand, missing 2 keys, but functional. I sent emails to shipping companies offered software that didn't exist, yet promised solutions I was still writing in code. When a manager at Gray Point Logistics responded asking for a prototype, I stayed up 40 hours straight. I drank gas station coffee and wrote line after line of predictive logic until the interface stopped crashing. He signed a contract 2 weeks later. It was our first check. I paid rent, bought diapers, and used the rest to register the LLC. I sold my car that winter to make the first payroll. Walked 3 miles in the snow with Elias bundled in a stroller that kept veering to the right. My husband Michael would meet us halfway when he could, thermos in hand, tired but proud. He was the only one who believed it would work. When he died, Elias was 10. I kept the company going because I had to. There was no choice. No trust fund, no family safety net. Just code and the belief that if I could solve enough problems for other people one day, I'd solve our own. Elias used to bring me sticky notes with doodles and charts of Mom's big company. He liked to sit under my desk while I typed, pretending he was on a secret mission. Now he sits at that desk. My desk. Giving interviews about how he built it from nothing. But I remember everything. And I still have the paperwork to prove it. The first time I wasn't invited, Elias said it was a mix-up, a simple oversight. The board dinner was meant to be small, strategic. He promised I'd be there for the next one. Then came the next one, the client retreat in Napa. I saw the photos online, him in a white linen shirt, glass in hand, surrounded by the same men who once called me the brains behind Quill. His caption read, "Grateful for visionary partners and a team that feels like family." I typed a reply, then deleted it before posting. I didn't trust what my hands would write. The summit followed 2 months later. The press release called it a milestone for the new leadership. I wasn't listed as attending, not even as a founder emeritus. When I called to ask, Elias said he was protecting my image. "You've done enough, Mom. You deserve to rest. Let me carry it now." His tone was gentle, the same one he used when I was recovering from the stroke. It took me too long to realize how well that tone worked on me. Last week, while sorting mail, I found the Gala invitation, tucked between insurance forms and an alumni newsletter. Heavy cardstock embossed lettering sealed in gold foil. Vertex Industries cordially invites Mr. Elias Quill to the annual Founders Gala. Just him. No one guessed. Not even a courtesy mention of me. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Then I called Grace, his assistant. She hesitated when she heard my voice. "Oh, Mrs. Quill. I didn't expect, am I still on the board's contact list?" "Grace." There was a pause. Papers rustled on her end, or maybe it was nerves. "Not officially, ma'am." Mr. Quill wanted to simplify communications. "To make things easier for you." "Easier," I repeated. When the call ended, I placed the invitation on my desk beside the first one we ever sent, printed on my home printer all those years ago. The edges yellowed, the ink slightly smudged. The contrast between them was almost elegant. By the time the clock struck midnight, I knew it wasn't about rest. It was about removal. And I was done pretending not to see it. Lionel spread the papers across his desk like a dealer laying out a bad hand. "He filed this 2 weeks before the gala," he said quietly. "Claims you're showing signs of cognitive decline. Says the board agreed you should transition into an advisory role." I picked up the top page. My name looked foreign in that font, Meredith Ann Quill, typed neatly above the words mentally unfit to retain executive control. It was signed by a physician I'd never heard of. The signature was deliberate, practiced. The kind you use when you've done this before. "Who is Dr. Kessler?" I asked. Lionel checked his notes. "Private consultant. Medical assessments for corporate disputes. He's testified in 2 other removal cases." He slid a stapled affidavit toward me. "There's no record of him ever examining you." I ran a finger along the margin where my name appeared again and again, as though repetition could make the lie real. "He didn't need to," I said. Elias just needed someone willing to confirm what he wanted, believed. Lionel's expression softened. "Do you want to contest it? We can file an injunction before he moves to dissolve the trust." I looked past him out the window at the street below. It was raining, and the reflection of passing headlights flickered on the glass like static. The thought of dragging Elias into court made something in me ache, but I also knew silence was what had gotten me here. I folded the document, slid it back into the envelope, and stood. "I'll think about it." When I got home, the house smelled faintly of dust and paper. I went straight to the study, opened the bottom drawer of the old oak filing cabinet, and pulled out the thick envelope marked in my handwriting, "Do not open unless." It had been sitting there for years, updated, resealed, waiting. Inside were the original patent filings, dated, notarized, and backed by the Federal Registry. Proof of authorship. Proof of origin. I laid the envelope flat on the desk and exhaled slowly. Everything Elias was building rested on these pages, and I still owned every single line. I started with the patent. It had sat untouched for over a decade, filed under my maiden name with an embedded timestamp that couldn't be altered. The root prediction algorithm was crude back then, stitched together during nursing breaks and long nights with a sleeping baby in the next room. But it worked. It still did. And my name was the only one on record. Next came the user data, the real backbone of our early success. Back when I was negotiating contracts with freight companies, I'd insisted we retain first-party access to anonymized delivery metrics. The prototype linked directly to that data. It had all been backed up, secured in a private digital vault no one else ever touched, because no one else ever bothered to learn how. The login still worked. I sat in my home office, hands steady over the keyboard, watching line after line of stored code and contracts fill the screen. All the original clients, all the beta tests. Every spreadsheet Elias had ever waved in front of a boardroom had come from here. I moved methodically, naming each folder by quarter and encrypting everything. Then I printed copies, 3 sets, and sealed them in separate file boxes. One for Lionel, one for safekeeping, one for whatever came next. Then I called the bank. The line of credit we used to scale the business was still under the original LLC. My name was still on the primary contact. I asked the manager to confirm our terms and address. When he hesitated, I sent a certified letter instead, requesting a freeze on disbursements until proper ownership could be verified. The last step was subtle. I opened the company's internal server and typed in an admin login from the original architecture, something I'd created back in the first year. Elias had never changed it. Never thought to. The interface opened like it had been waiting for me. And there it was, every current contract, every updated budget, every expansion file. I didn't touch anything. Not yet. I just downloaded everything to an external drive, labeled it with the date, and slid it into the desk drawer beside the envelope marked, "Do not open unless." I didn't need a speech. I didn't need to rehearse my tone or find the right words to soften the edges. I just scheduled coffee with 2 board members, people who'd known me since the early days when we held meetings in hotel lobbies and printed contracts at FedEx. The first was Thomas, a logistics veteran, who used to call me the brain, and Elias, the handshake. The second, Priya, was a strategist I'd recruited myself during our Series A. Neither had reached out since the transition, but neither declined the meeting either. I brought the patent filings. The co-founder affidavit my late husband had signed and notarized before he passed. A copy of the bank freeze. No emotion, no accusations, just a table between us and a small stack of truth. They flipped through the documents in silence. When Thomas looked up, his face had changed. "You never gave up ownership," he said quietly. "No," I replied. I gave him a title, not the foundation. They didn't ask many questions. They didn't need to. That same night, Grace forwarded me a memo Elias had sent internally. Beginning phase 2 of our rebrand, Quill Systems 2.0. Attached was an invoice from a boutique PR firm in New York. The amount was obscene. I cross-checked it against the expansion fund we'd set aside for warehouse automation. That account was draining fast. He was using company money to erase me, to tell a cleaner story, a shinier origin, one where the company had started with a young man in a sharp suit and a confident smile, not a mother hunched over a keyboard with a baby monitor blinking beside her. I printed the invoice, highlighted the withdrawal, and stapled it to a copy of the fund charter. Then I wrote one word across the top in ink theft. It wasn't personal anymore. It was structural. I slid the folder into the growing stack on my desk, then opened a clean page in my notebook and wrote one sentence at the top, "Initiate shareholder action." I drafted the letter in longhand first. There was something about ink on paper that made the words feel heavier, harder to deny. The clause was buried deep in the original governance agreement, Article 9, Section 3. It allowed for a founder-led emergency vote in the event of executive misconduct or breach of fiduciary duty. No one had touched that clause in 15 years, but I still remembered it. The final version was one page, clear, neutral in tone. I cited the relevant language, attached the documentation, and set the date for the vote, Friday, 1 week from the day the letter was sent. I didn't call to explain. I didn't warn Elias. I signed it, scanned it, and sent it to the board, our legal counsel, and the general company inbox, where all communications were logged by timestamp. Then I folded the original and mailed a hard copy addressed directly to Elias. After that, I closed my laptop and picked up a book. Not a legal guide, not a strategy manual. A biography, someone who had rebuilt after betrayal without bitterness. I read late into the night, not to study my enemy, but to remember the kind of leader I had once promised myself I'd be, the kind who created, not destroyed, the kind who left room at the table. Each morning that week I rose early. I watered my neglected houseplants. I cooked real meals instead of eating from takeout boxes. I returned calls to old colleagues not to rally them, but simply to say hello. They responded with warmth, curiosity, and stories about where they'd landed since leaving Quill Systems. One of them said, "I always wondered why you disappeared." I didn't correct him. By Thursday night, I had everything in order. My packet was ready. The vote would happen at 10 a.m. the next day. I placed the folder by the door, ironed my suit, and wrote a note to myself on a yellow sticky show-up steady. Let the truth speak. Then I turned off the light and slept through the night for the first time in months. The conference room looked smaller than I remembered. The glass walls that once felt transparent now seemed to hold everything in voices. Glances, the steady hum of the air vents. Elias was already seated at the far end of the table, flanked by his legal counsel. He didn't stand when I entered. I placed the folder in the center of the table and removed my coat. Inside were 7 exhibits, patent filings, tax returns, co-founder affidavits, and the full expansion fund ledger. No speeches, no introductions, just paper meeting polished wood. Thomas cleared his throat first. We've all reviewed the documentation. His tone was neutral, but his eyes weren't. The clause invoked by Mrs. Quill is valid. The motion before us is for reinstatement of founding authority. Elias laughed once under his breath. This is ridiculous. My mother doesn't understand what she's doing. She's not, Priya interrupted him. We've seen the filings, Elias. We've seen the withdrawals. We've seen the invoices. Her voice was calm, clinical. The kind of tone I used to use when reviewing performance reports. I didn't look at him when I spoke. You used company funds to pay for a rebrand that erased the founder of record. You filed medical paperwork declaring me unfit. You forged a certification from a doctor I never met. Those are facts, not feelings. He opened his mouth again, but stopped when Thomas raised a hand. The motion went to vote. Each board member said their decision out loud, one by one. 6 ayes, 1 no. When it was done, I collected the papers and slid them back into the folder. No applause, no chaos. Just a quiet rearrangement of power, as if the air itself had shifted sides. Elias looked down his knuckles, white around the edge of the table. For a moment, he looked young again, like the boy who once sat under my desk drawing charts of a company he said we'd run together. I wanted to feel something, relief, pride, even anger. But there was only stillness. I fastened the folder shut and said evenly, I'll send transition instructions by morning. Then I turned and walked out already thinking about what had to come next. Monday came with sharp sunlight and cold air through the office windows. I arrived before anyone else unlocking the glass doors myself and walking through the quiet halls that still smelled faintly of printer ink and dust. I took the long way to the boardroom, letting the silence settle. It didn't feel empty. It felt clean. By 9:00, the team had gathered. Some looked uncertain. A few looked relieved. Grace was already setting out the packets I'd prepared. No fanfare, no introductions, just the facts. I know this isn't what any of you expected I said, and I won't waste time on what's behind us. What matters now is what we're building next. They listened, really listened. Some leaned forward, some just exhaled for the first time in weeks. I outlined the new agenda. We'd begin the process of becoming employee-owned. 3 years. Phased equity distribution, profit sharing, transparent operations. Decisions made by the people who carried the weight, not just those who signed the checks. They asked questions, good ones, smart ones. Not a single person asked about Elias. I didn't say his name. I didn't need to. After the meeting, I returned to my office. The door still had my name on it from years ago, barely faded. I left it that way. I didn't need new plates or fresh paint. I needed a desk, a working pen, and a quiet place to think. I opened my planner to a fresh page. The paper had that crisp feel it always did, cool, untouched waiting. At the top, I wrote the date. Then in the space beneath it, 3 words I hadn't let myself say aloud in a long time, I'm still here. Then I turned to the next blank page and wrote the first bullet point on my new agenda. Not a title, not a legacy, just a goal. Build something that lasts even without you in the room. And with that, I picked up the phone, dialed a partner I hadn't spoken to in years, and started again.